What is up, guys? Eric here from Real Film Reviews, bringing you another movie review, this time for the new fantasy film, Warcraft. Warcraft is the on-screen adaptation of the world-renowned, insanely popular MMORPG video game, World of Warcraft. And this movie covers the very beginning of the story, which involves humans living in their area and an evil portal being opening up, which orcs come through and then begin to invade the human area, and the humans have to fight the orcs, and there's a whole bunch of malarkey happening and magic and craziness. Now, as a disclaimer before this review goes any farther, I never played World of Warcraft. I had many friends that dedicated many hours of their lives to this game. However, I gave it a shot one time on one of their profiles for about an hour and I couldn't get into it. So, this is coming from the point of view of someone that did not play this game and had very minimal knowledge of the world that this was being built around. This movie stars Ben Foster, Dominic Cooper, Paula Patton, and Travis Fimmel of Vikings fame. It is directed by Duncan Jones, who is more well known for his smaller films like Moon, and it is a very wide, very expansive film in its world. It is trying to very much so build this massive universe in this singular movie, and it does not do a very good job at it. In my opinion, this movie is not as bad as all of the reviews are making it out to be. It is not a great film, but it does actually do a few things right, and I think there are some aspects of this movie that are actually very well done. To start with, I didn't see this movie in 3D, and for the most part, the effects in this film were actually very good. I think most of them, especially the magic with the mages and stuff, I thought all of the magic looked really good, and for the most part, the orcs, when they were just interacting with other orcs, looked very real. This movie reminded me of Avatar in that sense because it was part human, part sort of entirely CGI, and when they interacted, it looked a little rough, but it still was good enough that it was believable throughout the film. I think Duncan Jones actually did a pretty solid job with this movie. He was handed an extremely immersive and expansive world to put to film, and he did a pretty damn good job of doing that. And I think that sure, he has some shortcomings in some of the action sequences and some of the quick cuts and some of the more awkward CGI sequences, but as a whole, I think he actually pushed this movie to make it so it maybe could compete and be good enough to garner the sequels that I'm sure it will actually get. The performances in this movie I would describe as fine. There's nothing special about any of the performances in my opinion. I think all of them are pretty much just okay throughout the whole movie. No one really surprised me, but also there wasn't anyone in particular that I was like, they were absolutely awful. So I would say that it's nothing to really write home about, but for the most part, none of the performances are too terrible. The action sequences, however, in this movie were actually pretty entertaining. I was surprised, being as it was going to be CGI versus live action combat. I didn't know if it would end up being that good, but most of the fighting sequences I actually enjoyed quite a bit in this film. I think they were choreographed well, and I think that they looked fairly real for the most part. The only complaint that I would have is there were some of the fights that felt like they were very rushed, and then other ones felt like they were dragged out for longer than was necessary, but you're gonna sort of end up with that in a movie of this size because they have to cut some down and then some of them have to seem more dramatic, so they'll drag them out. I just think that they chose the wrong fights to do that with. Now, the biggest thing about the World of Warcraft is the world, and I think that this movie sufficiently gave us enough of the world to make it so this movie worked, but it did not by any means show us enough of this universe, or however you want to describe it, because apparently there's different planets and stuff, but this movie did not do a good enough job of explaining how there's different races that all live in this place, and there's all these different countries and languages and species and all this stuff. And it just sort of swept it under the rug. I thought for sure when this movie started we would get one of those long 5-minute expositions of this whole world and its history, but we didn't. We got like 20 seconds of voiceover and then it just threw us into the story, and there were small parts where they would like show us a different race, or they'd show us a map of the world or something, but then we would never get any in-depth coverage of it to learn anything else about the world that this whole movie is taking place in. I think the script is mostly to blame for that as well. There are definitely lines in this movie that are very poorly written, and there's a lot of extremely cliche lines too, but I think the writing of this film is it's been biggest weakness. It's not a terribly written film. None of the dialogue is insanely horrible, but it just doesn't give us enough of this world for it to get fleshed out, and it doesn't let us care about these characters. It just gives us that one little cliche moment where it's like, oh yeah, my life's been sad up to this point. And every character literally gets that moment in this movie, and that one moment is supposed to make us care about that character, but it totally doesn't. I talked to one of my friends that I saw the film with who played World of Warcraft for many years, and he said that he cared about the characters in the movie. And I think that that's the main separation here, is that if you played the game, you automatically have a connection to some of these characters that were in the game. But if you didn't, they're just people in this movie that you have to care about, but they never give you any reason to care about them, really. This movie also felt rushed at times, which is strange because this movie is 2 hours long, and most fantasy epics can push to that 2.5 hour mark to make sure that nothing feels that way, but they chose not to. And also, the ending of this film just ends. There's no lead up, there's no, oh, this should maybe be the ending. The movie just ends, and it's very abrupt, and it doesn't really make any sense to me personally. Again, my friend that played the game said that it sort of made sense with where the story will go in the future, but it didn't make sense to me, and I'm gonna be the average moviegoer. The average moviegoer did not play World of Warcraft for 3 years and know the entire lore of the world. After the movie ended, I was talking to my friends, and I came up with the comparison that I think is very fitting for this film. It feels like Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1 had already built the world, so there's a main difference there in that it's a sequel, so you already know and care about the characters. But I think the main difference here is that in Mockingjay Part 1, it feels like absolutely nothing happens, and that's because basically nothing happens in that whole film. And this movie feels the same way. Things change, the situation changes throughout the film, but at the end of the film, it feels exactly the same as the beginning of the film did. It doesn't feel like the story progressed in any way. It doesn't feel like we saw enough that the world is so dramatically changed that should be the end of the film. It feels like we need something else there. And some movies can do that and it works, but this movie, it doesn't, because it gives us this massive world and shows us basically none of it. And then at the end of the film, we're supposed to feel like so much has changed in this world that we know nothing about, but in reality, the situation feels exactly the same at the end. I'm gonna give Warcraft a C. I think that a large effort was put into this film to try to make it a very good fantasy epic, and it did succeed in some ways. I don't think this movie is a total failure, and I also don't think it is the worst film I've ever seen in theaters. If you have any connection to World of Warcraft, if you enjoy fantasy films, go check this movie out. You will enjoy parts of it, and you may even like it more than me. I gave the film a C. My friend that played the game for years said that he probably would have given it a B. So there's a whole grade level difference there if you played the game. And I think that that's the big thing. If you have any connection to it, go see the film. If you are in any way attracted to a movie that's about orcs and swords and magic and all that fun stuff, I love Lord of the Rings, which is why I had some interest in seeing this film. Go check it out because it will make you like some of it. And this movie's nowhere near as good as a Lord of the Rings or anything at that level, but in time, if this movie gets the sequels that it's going to get, I think that maybe after a couple movies, these movies could evolve into something that is actually really good. Well guys, as always, I'm Eric. If you enjoyed this review, please do like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of Warcraft, share everything we do here on Real Film Reviews, and I hope to see you guys later.